So should you sell low ticket? Should you sell high ticket? Should you sell subscriptions? Well, the point of this video is to make it 100% clear on what you should be selling, okay? Now, I know a lot of you guys are probably thinking, I don't really want to sell high ticket, right? I'd rather just stick to low ticket, just because, people wouldn't pay me that much for my service, or, just sounds safer to do low ticket. And I know a lot of you guys, kind of believe this. And I used to believe, the same thing. I used to think the exact same way. I used to believe that people just wouldn't pay me, $4,000 to $6,000 for my service. And that's just kind of the way it is, right? Until I heard of this guy here. So let me go into what actually changed my mind, and I'll offer you a perspective on this. And by the end of this video, it should make perfect sense on what you should actually choose. So a quote from William Brown: "Low pricing is usually a consequence of the insecurities of the founder," right? So usually when people price their products at a low price, it's usually because you have some kind of belief system, right? It's either, maybe it was because of the way you were raised, maybe it's just, I guess you wouldn't pay that much money, Maybe you think that people wouldn't pay you that amount of money, right? So, or maybe it's just that you think that $4,000 to $6,000 is just a ton of money, and it's just a projection of, the way that you look at money onto other people. Regardless of which one it is, the reality behind this is that people absolutely do pay premium prices. This is just facts, okay? And the way that I found this out is actually a funny story, right? So this was with my first big client, and I'll go into the whole process. So when we started, right, he was selling a low ticket product, so it was like $100. Just because, I was on the low ticket side. I thought that, low ticket is the way to go. It's simpler, whatever, yada, yada, right? And so I heard, from a couple of my mentors at the time that maybe, high ticket is something worth trying. So we did, right? We tested a $2,000 program, right? A coaching program, which, to be honest, it seemed like just a ton of money for me at the time, right? Now, what happened is people bought it instantly, right? It sold really freaking fast. So I saw that, I said, okay, well, let's try pushing it up to like 2.5K, right? Why not? We can try. To be honest, I thought, okay, $500, that's a little bit pushing it, but let's try, right? So we did that, no difference. Still sold like crazy, right? We did $3,000, right? Pushed it up. Oh, 3,000 must be the limit, right? It can't go past 3,000. Still sold, no difference. We pushed it up to 4K. Oh, 4K seems like a lot. No difference, right? Or minimal difference. Eventually, we even got up to like 6K, right? Still sold, no problem, no problem. So point being, people absolutely do buy at those price points. And now looking at the actual numbers of how that went down. So the first month when we were still doing low ticket, we made something like 4.8K, which is pretty much peanuts, right? Pretty much nothing. The first month of transitioning to high ticket, and keep in mind, this was not changing, some fancy, marketing strategy or whatsoever. It was just changing the product, changing the price point. We made 21,000, right? $21,000. So that was the first month. And later, I think like 3 or 4 months after that, we went on to make somewhere around like 50K on average per month. That's a 4 times increase, a little bit more, right? A little bit more than a 4 times increase. So it clearly works, right? Now, the important thing here, I'm not saying that if you just, switch to high ticket, you're just gonna make 4 times more money the first month, just like we did, right? Because this isn't magic. Because in order to actually sell high ticket, you need the right systems, you need the right people, and you need the right knowledge in place. Because the reality right now is that you probably don't actually have a solid sales system. You don't actually have, a good understanding of, for example, how to actually manage a proper sales pipeline, like all the processes in place, the setting team, the closing team, the follow-ups, triaging. You don't probably have the right CRM processes in place. You don't even have, the right talent. You don't even know where to find good salespeople, right? You don't know how to train them. You don't know how to manage them. So we can't just pretend that just changing, your product pricing is gonna just 4x your business. Probably won't, right? So you can't just change your beliefs. But given the right, backhand in place, you absolutely can do the same thing that I did right here, right? Now, to kind of illustrate my point of why high ticket is actually better, I like to introduce you to something called the 50-40-10 rule. Now, I know Hormozi went into this a little bit. I'm not sure if he actually calls it the same thing, probably not. But pretty much here's my interpretation of it, right? So just imagine this is like stages of buyers. We've got the 50% down at the bottom, right? These are non-buyers, right? So 50% of the market will just never buy. No matter how much marketing, no matter how much value you give them, no matter how many email sequences like retargeting ads, no matter what you throw at them, they're just non-buyers. And that's okay. Then the upper level, right, the 40%, these are your low ticket buyers. Now there's an important distinction to be made here with the low ticket buyers. So low ticket buyers, meaning they would buy your low ticket stuff. So I would say around half of those are people who would never buy your high ticket. Maybe it's their financial situation. It could be their belief system. Regardless of what it actually is, those are just people who, again, no matter how much, how good your sales team is, no matter how good your marketing is, they just cannot or will not buy your high ticket, right? So that's around half, but they will buy your low ticket stuff. But then also, the more important part, the other half, is what I like to call the swing vote, right? These are people who could actually be converted, who will buy your low ticket, but also, given the right marketing, given the right, nurturing, enough value, right, enough information, a good sales process, they would also be open to buying your high ticket stuff if you have the right systems, right? So they could actually be converted. This is the swing vote. And then at the very top, you just have the top 10%. These are people who would buy your high ticket. They just get it, right? They understand risk reward. They understand that you need to, invest in your skill set in order to actually get results, that you need to risk something. And they're just okay with buying stuff like that, right? And even if you have just mediocre or okay or average marketing, average sales, they'll still buy from you, right? Because they just get it. Now, this is the pyramid. If we actually do the math behind the pyramid, right? And by the way, before you go on and say like, it's not actually 10%, it's not actually 40, 50, whatever. This is just to make a point. Obviously, I understand it's not the exact numbers, so don't be like a dickhead in the comments. But just understand the point I'm making here, okay? So scenario one, you're selling low ticket, right? So imagine there's 10 people in this pyramid, right? So if you divide that up, that's like 1 high ticket buyer, 4 low ticket, and 5 non-buyers, right? So 10 people in the pyramid in the market, and if you're selling low ticket, 5 of these will buy your low ticket, right? So these guys here, and then also the high ticket buyers. So if you're selling a $100 product, and let's say you have a 4-month, lifetime of each customer, so that's going to be a $400 LTV for each customer, right? In total, if that's 5 people, you're going to make $2,000. Scenario 2, you're selling high tickets, so same 10 people in the market. Let's say you're shit at marketing, you have no clue what you're doing, and you're still going to get, these top 10% here. You're going to have 1 client, right? And let's just say you're selling $5,000 programs here, which is, pretty average. You're going to be making 5K if you're good at marketing, if you have the right systems, if you have, the right backend processes. You could close 2, right? And you can make 10K. Comparing these 2 scenarios, right? Low ticket, you're making 2K. High ticket, you're making 5 to 10K, right? Low ticket, you have 5 clients. High ticket, you have 1 or 2 clients. Starting to see the difference? Hopefully. The real advantage of high ticket is not just the money, although that's obvious. The real advantage is in how many clients you have to deal with, right? And what that actually means. Given, the same amount of time and effort dedicated to each group, right? Let's just say you spend like 10 hours a week on clients, right? On getting them results. Which group do you think is going to get better results? The 5 guys that you're trying to teach, or 1 or 2? Obviously, this group here. So just because, you're able to actually dedicate more time per person, right? More effort. So obviously they're going to get better results, right? Now, with more results, what that means is better social proof, right? More testimonials, better case studies. With better social proof, that means better marketing. With better marketing, what that means is more money, right? More clients. So with high tickets, one of the biggest advantages is that people just get better results, right? And that's because of, first of all, you're spending more time with each client while you're still, keeping your total time investment low because there's not actually many clients, right? But secondly, they pay more, so naturally they're way more committed to what you're actually selling, right? Way more committed to their goals. To put it in perspective, who do you think is going to run faster? You, if you bet, $5 with your friend, or you, if you're, running away from a hungry lion and he's chasing after you and he wants to eat your guts. Obviously, if there's a lion behind you, you're going to run way faster than if you just bet, your friend $5. Now, the reason for that is because what happens if you fail? Right? Well, if you fail with your friend, you're losing $5. If you fail with the lion, you're losing your life, right? Same thing with, let's say, coaching programs, with info products, right? If you invested $5 or $100 into something and you don't really, get anything from it, well, okay, that's $100. You spend $100 on groceries. It doesn't really matter. Well, if you spend 5K on a coaching program and if it doesn't work out, well, you got some explaining to do to, maybe the wife, maybe, if you're single, you just, you could have bought something that you actually would enjoy with that money, right? So yeah, people are going to get better results, and that's the beauty of high ticket. Now, the second thing I want to touch on is positioning. So let me give you another example. Let's say you're in real estate and this guy comes up to you and he says, look, give me $100 and with those $100, I'll turn it into 10K and I'll give you the 10K, right? That's the first person. But then a second guy also walks up to you and he says, look, give me 5K and I'll turn that into 10K and I'll give you the 10, right? I just need the 5K first. Now the question is, which one of those guys actually sounds more believable? Well, obviously the guy who asked for 5K, because if you can actually get someone, let's just say, 10K, why on earth would you be undercharging so severely, right? That just sounds like, that sounds like a scam, sounds like bullshit, right? So undercharging actually destroys your credibility, right? Because people naturally correlate, pricing and quality. It's just a natural bias that people have. Now, third thing is exclusivity. This is something that also most people kind of ignore. Now, let me give you another analogy, right? I'm spitting out a lot of analogies here. Let's say you have, two girls at the bar, right? So the first girl, she's just saying yes to anyone. Any single dude that comes up to her and hits on her, he's getting that number, he's taking her home, and everyone knows that, right? Everyone knows that. Now, there's a second girl. The second girl, she's hot, and, 10 guys came up to her. She rejected every single one, right? She said no. Didn't want to go home with them. So now, which one of those girls do you think is more desirable? The girl who just says yes to everyone, or the girl who says no to almost everyone, but she might say yes to you, right? That's called supply and demand, right? Scarcity creates desire because people want what they cannot have, right? Let me repeat that. People want what they can't have. So if you're just selling something that everyone can get, there's no scarcity behind it. There's no real scarcity, not the fake stuff, not like, I'm only accepting blah, 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 bullshit, and then you just let 100 people in the program. But the real scarcity, where some people genuinely want to get in, but they can't, right? They can't. That's what creates, real exclusivity, and that's what makes your service so much more desirable. So naturally, when you price it higher, there's going to be a lot of people who want to get in, but they can't. So that's a factor that you might want to consider. And yeah, being selective about clients makes you more desirable. Now, going back to kind of my pyramid here, a lot of you guys, might have this critique of, this is not actually realistic. It's not 10, 40, 50. Well, let's break down the actual numbers, right? The actual numbers, the industry standard numbers. And by the way, I have a very good perspective on this because I've been both on the low ticket side and I've been on the high ticket side. So I know all of the numbers on both sides. Let's run the scenarios. So with low ticket, on average, or this is not average actually, this is an amazing rate, and this is actually quite hard to hit. You're going to be seeing something like a 10% lead to purchase rate. If you're really good, this is great, right? Times that by 100 leads. So in both scenarios, we're going to have 100 leads. Times that by $100 product price, times that by 4-month lifetime value or lifetime, you're going to be making 4K, right? Second scenario, high ticket. So you got a 10% lead to call ratio, which is quite average. We've seen that, time and time again. Times that by 100 leads times 80% show up rates. This is, solid, but also quite realistic. I usually average something like that. Times by 30% close rates, again, pretty realistic. Times that by 5K. So you're making 12K. Now, why is this the case? Why do you make more with high ticket, right? Well, the reason behind it is because you can have a sales team. Because most people, they are gonna avoid action by default. People don't want to take action. People don't want to do uncomfortable stuff. They don't want to risk money, And when you do have a great sales team, you can actually help people take action towards their goals, which will capture a much higher percentage of your audience, right? Whereas with low ticket, sales teams don't really make economical sense just because the commissions, right? If you have like a sales team, so like if they were to close low ticket, what they would get 10% commissions on each close, that's like $10, right? So it doesn't really make sense, just economically speaking. So you can't really have a sales team, so you can't really get or help people get over that line. which means that naturally you're not going to capture as many people. Now the downside here, obviously it's not just, sunshines and rainbows. You do have, sales team commissions, which is going to be anywhere from like 10 to 15%. So in reality, this 12K turns into something like 10K. But now if you run the math, high ticket is just going to win every single time, unless there's a small caveat if your audience is just completely broke. But in that case, you really shouldn't be selling to that audience in any case, so that's kind of a irrelevant scenario anyways. But now something I want to kind of mention here is that low ticket actually has its place, right? It's not completely useless. It's not like it's like black and white, low ticket is bad, high ticket is good, you should never do low ticket. Low ticket definitely has a really good use case, and I'll give you a really good example. So another example, running a partner offer, again, a trading offer. And what we were running here is essentially something called a low to high ticket funnel, right? So the way it works is you're paying for low ticket buyers, right? You're running ads to a low ticket product, and then from that you're generating leads, right? So people who buy the low ticket, and then you're nurturing them, you're putting them in the sales pipeline, and essentially you're trying to upsell them a high ticket product, right? So what ended up happening here, if we actually check my, actual numbers here, this was for August. So we spent 7K in ad spend, and from that 7K, we generated 7K, right? So if you see here, the front end P&L was like $200. So we actually lost $200 on running the ads, right? This was the cost of running the ads. So again, just to clarify this, so we spent 7K, but the actual cost, right? See the difference, cost and spend? The actual cost was $200, right? Now, for that $200, what we got was 222 low ticket customers. And now taking them through the pipeline, what has essentially ended up happening was from those 222 low ticket customers, we upsold them to high ticket and we made $22,000 in profit, right? This was after ad spend, after, breaking even on the front end. Because essentially what we did here is because of the short, sales cycle of low ticket, we just spammed ads and we got pretty much all of the ad spend we got back within like the same day or maximum like within the next day. Essentially, it's a cash flow positive way of acquiring leads for free, pretty much, and then upselling them to high ticket. And this just isn't possible if you were trying to do it with just high ticket. So in short, low ticket works if it's generating and nurturing leads for your high ticket funnel. Low to high ticket funnels are just one of the greatest of all time ad funnels to run. I love them so much. This is my baby here, okay? But the reason why low ticket doesn't work for most, and this is where most people mess it up, is what they're trying to do essentially is they have, a broad problem, which could be, for example, profitability in the trading niche, right? People getting profitable, being unprofitable, right? Then you have narrow problems, which are part of this bigger problem. For example, one of their problems might be they don't know how to enter trades, right? The second one might be they can't manage risk. Third one might be they can't, stop going on tilt, right? So a whole bunch of little problems in here. And essentially what most people try and do with their low ticket product, they try to solve the same broad problem, right, that their high ticket solves. And essentially what ends up happening is this just cannibalizes their high ticket because you're solving the same problem, right, just for a lower price. So it completely removes the need for, people actually buying their high ticket. And then second of all, they just provide a crappy solution to a broad problem, right? So they just think, oh, you know what I'll do is I'll offer a cheaper solution to this same problem, like to the same broad problem, and I'll just do a cheaper or a worse job of actually solving that problem. So now the way you actually do this is your low ticket should offer a complete solution to a narrow problem within your broader problem, right? So you're taking one of these dots here and you're solving them really well with your low ticket. You're not trying to solve all of them with a mediocre solution. The wrong approach here is solving all of this pretty badly, right? Pretty poorly. And that's what most people try and do. And then what ends up happening pretty much is people buy something, they buy your course for like $40. They see it's not good and they don't think, oh, this was only like $40, so the 4K thing must be better. Obviously not, like people don't actually think that. The way they think is, oh, the $40 thing sucks, so then his 4K stuff must be horrible. Like that should be garbage too, right? So why would I ever buy from this guy ever again? They don't see the $40, they don't think like, oh, this was only $40, it makes sense. Like, no. If you gave them something which was not quality, they will just think the rest of your stuff is also not quality. Right? And that goes for example with content as well. People judge the quality of your free content as well, right? So yeah, pick one of these problems, solve it really well if you're gonna do low ticket, and make sure that it's actually within this, broader problem, right? Because another thing that a lot of people kind of mess up as well here is they're gonna be creating some kind of low ticket product that maybe it does solve a small problem really well, right? But it just solves the problem that your high ticket buyers don't actually have. Therefore, you're attracting leads with your low ticket, which just are incompatible with the high ticket product because they're in a completely different, problem category. So you'll see this manifest, when your low ticket is selling really well, but then you can't actually convert those low ticket leads into high ticket, right? And it just doesn't make sense. For beginners, just skip the low to high ticket. It's complex as shit. Like if you don't understand the back end behind this sort of stuff, if you don't actually understand the why, just skip it. Don't try and be a smart ass. You're just gonna fuck it up. Let someone like me handle it if you're gonna do that, right? If not, just stick to high ticket. It's way more simple, it's way more lean, and it's gonna make you a fuck ton more money, right? Now, the last thing I just wanna address is something I like to call the monthly recurring revenue myth, and it gets on my nerve quite a bit, to be honest. It's this myth that you can have like recurring revenue that just stacks over time, and to be honest, like it sounds so good. And at first I also fell to the same pitfall, right, that most people fall into, which is like this utopian vision that your monthly revenue is just gonna stack and stack and stack and it just never stops. And it does stop when you use some logic. So I got one word for you, right? Churn, right? Churn. This is your nightmare if you believe in this stuff. Look, you need fresh customers. You need fresh customer acquisition. This is just unavoidable. Okay, let me put this in bold. It's unavoidable. Because even if you're lucky, and let's say your churn is like 20%, right? So that means 20% of your paying customers are leaving every single month, right? That still means if you want to actually grow that offer by 20%, you're gonna have to replace 40% of all of your customers, right? 40%. So if you're gonna have to acquire new customers anyways, why not at least do it with an economically superior method? Because the reason why one-time offers actually outperform subscriptions is because people never see subscriptions. It's because people see one-time purchases as investments, right? They compare that amount of money to, for example, what they have saved up, right? So it makes a ton more sense, taking out maybe a larger chunk of money if it makes sense in terms of an investment. Well, when you compare that to a subscription, what people will do is they will compare the amount, which is the subscription, and compare that to their monthly cash flow, right? So how much they make per month. And usually that will not fit into their budget, or that will eat into their monthly budget, and they don't really see it as an investment. They don't really see it from the perspective of, oh, I can take this money from my savings. So that just makes them way less inclined to actually spend more money with you. That's just the simple way of putting it. I don't want to dive into this because I can make like a whole video on this, to be honest. But yeah, don't fall for this. It's not really all that. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope it makes sense now on what you should actually do. And if you did, you can drop a like or something, drop a comment, follow me on Instagram, DM me if you want to work with me, and that's that. Bye.